What would you do if you knew that the pill in your hand was about to kill a man? You'd lose your job, you'd lose your home, your grandson loses his future, and you might be wrong. So do you give him the pill? Or do you throw away the only life you've built? Bernice Carter had 90 seconds to decide. She was 52, a black housekeeper, $5 in her checking account, a sick grandson across town, and a billionaire lying in front of her who everyone said was in a coma. But his finger just tapped the sheet, and downstairs his wife was calling her name. Bernice looked at the yellow pill, closed her hand around it. No. She had no idea that a single choice was about to give her a future she never dared to dream of. 3 weeks earlier, Bernice Carter almost didn't take the job. Looking back, she'd say it was her grandson's shoes that made her say yes. It was 4:40 in the morning. The kitchen in her little rented duplex on Sycamore Lane was cold. Bernice stood at the stove in her housecoat, stirring grits in a pot her mother had given her 40 years ago. On the microwave sat a stack of bills held together with a rubber band. Overdue electric, overdue water, a medical copay letter for Jamal's asthma specialist, $312. She didn't have $312. On the windowsill, a framed photo of her husband Darnell, gone 4 years now, a stroke at 56. No life insurance. The policy had lapsed 3 months before he died. She still hadn't forgiven herself for that. She stirred the grits and whispered like she did every morning, "Lord, just get me through today." Footsteps on the stairs. Jamal came down, 16 years old, already 6 feet tall, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was wearing his sneakers. The left one had a sole that flapped when he walked. He'd been gluing it back together for 2 months. He saw her looking, tucked his foot behind the other one. "Grandma, I'm good," he said before she could say anything. She turned back to the stove so he wouldn't see her face. "Sit down, baby, eat." She put the plate in front of him. Eggs, grits, 1 piece of toast with too much butter. He started to eat, then stopped. "Grandma." "I'm gonna turn down the Yale thing." Her hand froze on the coffee pot. The Yale summer program. Jamal had gotten in. Full academic standing. Aerospace track. $3,800 tuition plus housing. She'd read the acceptance letter 6 times the night it came. Cried over it in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear. "Jamal." "Grandma, it's fine. I'll go next year. Or I'll just study on my own. I got the library." He said it easy, like it didn't matter, but his eyes were on his plate. Bernice wanted to say something. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. She just buttered his toast again, harder than she needed to. The bus ride to the Ashford estate took 1 hour and 10 minutes. 2 transfers. A 12-minute walk up a private road lined with maple trees. Bernice had cleaned houses for 31 years. She'd learned one thing that never failed. Rich people's floors got dusty the same as poor people's floors. Dust didn't care about money. She thought about Darnell on the bus. He used to sit next to her on these same morning rides when she was starting out. He'd squeeze her hand and say, "Bernie, kindness don't cost nothing, and it pays the best interest." She almost laughed, almost cried. The Ashford gate was taller than her whole duplex. She pressed the intercom. A clipped voice let her in. The head of staff was a thin man named Mr. Prescott. He walked her through the rules like he was reading a contract. No speaking unless spoken to. No eye contact with Mr. Ashford. No phones on the upper floor. No entering the East Wing without permission. "Mr. Ashford is recovering from a serious accident," he said. "He is in a medically induced coma. His wife oversees his care personally. You will not interfere." Bernice nodded. "Yes, sir." Then she met the wife. Vivian Ashford Holloway came gliding down the marble staircase in a silk robe at 9 in the morning. 38 years old, blonde, smile too wide. "Oh, you must be Bernice." She took both of Bernice's hands in hers like they were old friends. "Prescott, she has such a kind face. I can tell already." Bernice smiled politely, but something inside her went quiet. The kind of quiet a dog gets when it hears something nobody else can hear. On Vivian's desk, as they walked past, Bernice caught a glimpse of a small silver pill case. 2 compartments, one marked H, the other one blank. Vivian slid a folder over it without breaking her smile. Bernice logged it away, didn't say a word. The last person she met that day was the old woman in the guest house, Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, Harrison Ashford's mother. 89, silver hair pinned back, hands folded on her lap, eyes sharp as glass. She lived alone in the small cottage behind the main house. Bernice brought her tea on a tray. Mrs. Whitaker looked up when Bernice walked in, and something in her face broke, just for a second, like she'd been waiting a long time for somebody. "What's your name, child?" "Bernice, ma'am. Bernice Carter." The old woman's eyes went wet. "You have honest eyes, Bernice Carter." She reached out and squeezed Bernice's wrist. Weak fingers, strong grip. "Please, watch over my boy, please." Bernice didn't understand the words, but she understood the grip. "Yes, ma'am," she said softly. "I will." That night on the bus home, Bernice thought about the pill case, the too sweet smile, the old woman's wet eyes. She thought, something ain't right in that house. Then she thought about Jamal's shoes, the flapping sole, the Yale letter in the drawer. And she thought, but I need this job, Lord, I need this job. She pulled out her flip phone and texted her grandson, "On my way home, baby. Be there in an hour." She didn't know it yet, but in 21 days at 2:14 in the morning, in that exact house, she was going to have to choose between that job and a man's life. And kindness, she'd learn, has a way of circling back. 21 days passed, and Bernice started noticing things she wasn't supposed to notice. Every morning at 7 sharp, Dr. Elaine Brooks came to give Harrison his medication. A small white pill, scored down the middle. Bernice had seen it once when she was dusting the medical cart. Every evening at 7, Vivian gave him the second dose. But Vivian never let anyone else in the room when she did it. Not the nurse, not even the doctor. And every time Vivian came out of that bedroom, she'd pause at the door, close her eyes, and exhale. Slow, long, like a woman setting down a heavy bag. It didn't look like grief, it looked like relief. Bernice told herself she was imagining things. Rich people were just different, that's all. Then came the storm. A nor'easter rolled in from the coast on a Thursday afternoon. Rain sideways, thunder rattling the windows. The estate's power flickered twice before the backup generators kicked in. At 6 p.m., Vivian came down the staircase in a tailored coat, a small suitcase behind her. "Bernice, sweetheart, I've got an emergency board meeting in Manhattan. I won't be back until tomorrow morning." She held out a small orange pill bottle. "At 2 a.m. exactly, you'll give him one of these. One, with water. He won't wake up. He's still in the coma, but this keeps his heart rhythm stable." Bernice took the bottle, looked at the label. The label was printed crooked. The ink was smudged at the edge. She'd worked in enough houses to know, real pharmacy labels don't smudge. "Yes, ma'am," she said. Vivian smiled that too sweet smile, touched Bernice's cheek. "You're a lifesaver, really." Then she was gone. At 11 that night, Bernice's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was Jamal. "Grandma." His voice was thin, wheezy. "I can't. The inhaler's empty. Pharmacy's closed. Bernice's chest went tight. She pressed the phone hard against her ear. Baby, listen to me. Breathe slow. In through your nose. Hold. Out through your mouth. You hear me?" Yeah. "Where's Miss Diane?" "Next door." "You call her, right now. She's got that nebulizer for her boy. You tell her Grandma said come help you. Can you do that?" "Yeah." "Baby, I can't leave. I can't leave this house tonight. You understand me?" A long pause. "I know, Grandma, I know." She hung up and stood alone in the marble kitchen of a mansion that didn't belong to her, pressing a dish rag to her mouth so nobody would hear her cry. She called Miss Diane. Miss Diane said she was on her way. Then Bernice wiped her face, washed her hands, and went back to work, because that's what you do. 1:50 a.m. The house was silent except for the rain. Bernice stood in the kitchen preparing the tray. water glass, napkin, pill bottle. She opened the bottle, shook one pill into her palm, and stopped. The pill was oval, pale yellow, no markings. She stood there for a long time with it in her hand. Yesterday morning, she'd been dusting the medical cart. She'd seen Dr. Brooks's medication pill, small, white, scored down the middle. This wasn't that pill. Her mind started going somewhere she didn't want it to go. She remembered something else. 2 days ago, she'd been mopping the hallway outside Vivian's study. The door was cracked. Vivian was on the phone. Once the neurologist signs the irreversibility certificate, the trust executes automatically, 3 weeks at most. At the time, Bernice had thought, rich people business, none of mine. Now the words echoed back with a different meaning, a heavier meaning. She looked at the yellow pill. She looked at the crooked label, and she whispered very quietly, Lord, tell me I'm wrong. She carried the tray upstairs, pushed the bedroom door open with her hip. Harrison Ashford lay still, IV drip in his arm, oxygen tube under his nose. The machines beeped soft and steady. The room smelled like antiseptic and Vivian's perfume. Bernice set the tray on the nightstand, looked at the man in the bed. 61 years old, thin, pale, lines around his mouth, a stranger. She said quiet, Mr. Ashford, sir, it's Bernice. I'm here to give you your medicine. Nothing. She reached for the pill, and his hand moved. Slow, like it weighed 100 pounds. His palm turned up, open, empty. Stop. Bernice froze. She leaned down close. Her heart was hammering. Sir, can you hear me? His finger tapped the sheet. Twice. Bernice's knees almost gave out. She looked at the pill in her other hand, the yellow pill, the wrong pill, the one with the crooked label. She thought about Jamal, wheezing over the phone. She thought about the Yale letter, the $312 copay, the flapping sole on his sneaker. This job, this roof, everything. Then she looked at the man in the bed, at his open palm, and she said, so soft only God could hear her, All right, sir. All right. I got you. Bernice had 90 seconds before the house security camera in the hallway would cycle back to this door. She knew because she'd been cleaning that hallway for 3 weeks. She pocketed the yellow pill, slipped it deep into her apron. Then she opened her little coin purse and took out a sugar-free mint, the kind she carried for her dry throat. She crushed it between 2 spoons, stirred the powder into the water glass until it dissolved, set the glass on the nightstand, untouched, full. Her hands were shaking so bad the spoon clinked against the glass. She pressed her palms flat against her apron to still them. She leaned down close to Harrison's ear. Sir, I ain't gonna give it to you. Something ain't right. If I'm making sense, tap your finger. 2 taps, deliberate, slow. Bernice's eyes filled. She didn't know why. Maybe because for the first time in 4 years, somebody was trusting her with something bigger than a mop. All right, she whispered. All right, you hold on. I'm gonna figure this out. She needed proof, because she knew how this story could go wrong. A black housekeeper accuses a white billionaire's wife of poisoning him? Without proof, she'd be arrested by breakfast. Jamal would go into the system. She'd never clean another house again. She needed proof. Tonight, before Vivian came home. She slipped down the hallway in her soft shoes. The house was still, just rain on the windows. Vivian's study was unlocked. The silver pill case sat on the desk where she'd always left it. Bernice pulled out her flip phone, the cheap one from the gas station. She opened it, tapped the camera. Click. The pill case from the top. Click. Open, showing both compartments. White pills in the one marked H, yellow pills in the blank one. Click. The crooked label on the bottle she'd brought up. Then she went to the medical cart in the hallway. Dr. Brooks's bottle was there, neat pharmacy label. She unscrewed the cap. One small white pill, scored down the middle. She laid the white pill next to the yellow pill on the cart, took a picture of them side by side. Then she dropped her phone. It clattered on the marble. She froze, held her breath. Nothing. The house stayed asleep. She picked the phone up, kept moving. She went out the back door into the rain, ran across the wet grass to the guest house, knocked soft on the window. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker opened the door in her bathrobe, took one look at Bernice's face and said, "Come in, child. Come in." Bernice showed her the photos, the pill case, the yellow pill, the white pill. Mrs. Whitaker's face turned the color of paper. She sat down hard on the couch. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it in my bones." "Ma'am, 3 weeks ago my son called me." The old woman's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "The night before the accident. He told me he was changing his will. He told me Vivian wouldn't like it." Bernice sat down next to her. "Ma'am, I don't know what to do. If I call the police and I'm wrong—" "You're not wrong." Mrs. Whitaker stood up, walked to a small desk, opened the top drawer, pulled out a business card and a phone. "This man was my husband's attorney. His son handles our affairs now. His name is Thomas Halloran. You call him, not the police. Him." She pressed the card into Bernice's hand. "Tell him Eleanor Whitaker says the wolf is in the house. He'll know what to do." Bernice dialed with cold fingers. 3 rings. A deep voice answered, wide awake even at 2 in the morning. "Halloran. Sir, my name is Bernice Carter. I'm the housekeeper at the Ashford estate. Mrs. Whitaker said to call you and say the wolf is in the house." A long pause on the line, then, "Describe the pill." She did. "Stay where you are. Don't leave the bedroom. Don't give him anything. Don't touch anything else. I'm 20 minutes out with a private paramedic." "Sir." "Mrs. Carter, you may have just saved a man's life. Stay with him." The line went dead. Bernice ran back through the rain, up the stairs, into the bedroom. Harrison was still there, still breathing, still pretending. She sat down in the chair by the bed, took his hand. His fingers were cold. She didn't know what to say to a billionaire, so she said what she'd say to anybody. "My name is Bernice. I'm the one been cleaning your house. I got a grandson named Jamal. He's 16. He got asthma real bad. Right now he's sitting at my neighbor's house breathing into a nebulizer." She squeezed his hand. "Jamal, he knows about fighting to breathe. He does it every week. So you fight like him, sir. You hear me? You fight like a 16-year-old black boy from Ridgefield, Connecticut. You fight." She started humming, "Amazing Grace," the same song her mother used to hum when Bernice was scared as a little girl. Harrison's finger tapped against hers. Once, twice, 3 times. A tear slid from the corner of his closed eye down into his ear. Bernice kept humming. 3:04 a.m. Headlights swept across the bedroom ceiling. Thomas Halloran came up the stairs 2 at a time. 60 years old, white hair. The kind of man who walked like he owned the weather. Behind him, a private paramedic with a medical bag. Behind her, a woman in a dark coat who flashed a badge. Detective Ruth Donnelly. Off the books. Halloran looked at the tray on the nightstand. The untouched water glass. The empty pill bottle. Bernice sitting there still holding Harrison's hand. He looked at her for a long moment. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "show me." She showed him the pill, in her apron pocket, pale yellow, wrapped in a clean tissue. Halloran closed his eyes for 1 second. "Open them." "Bag it," he told the detective. The paramedic went to work, pulled blood, checked vitals, read the monitors. She looked up at Halloran. "His heart rate and respiration are suppressed, but this isn't coma. This is sedation. Heavy sedation. He's been getting hit with something for weeks." She looked at Bernice. "Ma'am, if you had given him that pill tonight on top of what's already in his system, he would not have woken up." The paramedic stood. "We're transferring him. Private clinic. Now." They wheeled Harrison out on a gurney. The rain had stopped. The sky was that gray-blue color right before dawn. Halloran stayed behind a minute, turned to Bernice in the empty hallway. "Mrs. Carter, do you understand what you just did?" Bernice was standing there, still holding her empty tray. She looked down at it, looked at him. "Sir," she said, "I just didn't give him the pill." Halloran stared at her. Then slowly he smiled. The kind of smile a man gives when he realizes God has been in the room the whole time. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You did." She thought the hardest part was over. It wasn't even close. Dawn came gray and cold. Bernice rode the bus home with her apron still on. Her hands still smelled like antiseptic. She opened the front door. Jamal was asleep on the couch. Miss Diane's nebulizer sat on the coffee table beside an empty juice box. His breathing was steady, slow, normal. Bernice stood in the doorway and watched his chest rise and fall, rise and fall. Then she went into the kitchen, pressed a dish towel against her mouth, and cried for 20 minutes straight. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it doesn't make a sound. She wasn't crying about the pill. She was crying about everything. About Darnell, about the shoes, about the Yale letter in the drawer, about a world that asked so much from people who had so little. When she was done, she washed her face, made coffee, and waited. The call came at 2 that afternoon. Harrison was stable, transferred to a private clinic outside Hartford. Blood work confirmed benzodiazepine compounds at 3 times the safe threshold. The yellow pill wasn't medication. It was a sedative. One more dose on top of weeks of accumulation would have caused respiratory arrest. They would have called it a tragic complication of his coma. Nobody would have questioned it. Detective Donnelly had opened a formal investigation. Vivian had not been informed. Surveillance was in place. Halloran told Bernice all of this on the phone. She sat at her kitchen table and listened. Didn't say much. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to know. This woman tried to murder her husband, and you stopped it." Bernice looked at Darnell's photo on the windowsill. "I just didn't give him the pill, sir." The next day, Halloran came to her duplex. He looked strange in her kitchen. His suit probably cost more than her car. He sat at her table anyway, didn't seem to mind the wobble in the leg. He set an envelope in front of her. $50,000 from a discretionary account. No strings, no publicity. Just a thank you. Bernice looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. "Mr. Halloran?" "Yes, ma'am." "I appreciate it, I do, but I can't take that." He tilted his head. "Sir, if I take money for what I did, it stops being what it was. It just becomes a job I got paid for. And it wasn't a job, it was the right thing." Halloran sat quiet for a long time. Then he smiled. That same slow smile from the hallway. "Mrs. Carter, you are a rare woman." He slid the envelope back into his coat, but before he left, he placed something else on her table. A small leather card holder, old, worn soft at the corners. Embossed on the front, a silver compass rose. "Hold on to that for me," he said. She picked it up, ran her thumb across the compass. "What is it?" "You'll know when the time comes." He walked out into the afternoon. She watched him go, then she looked at the card holder in her hand. She didn't understand what it meant, not yet, but something in her chest told her Darnell's old saying was about to come true. Kindness pays the best interest. She kept noticing things she wasn't supposed to notice, and somebody, somewhere, was noticing her. Halloran had told her to go back to work, keep the routine normal, act like nothing happened. So Bernice rode the bus up that private road every morning and cleaned the Ashford house like she always had. Vivian came back from Manhattan the next day. Same smile, same perfume, same voice like warm honey poured over something sharp. "How was last night, Bernice? Everything smooth?" Bernice kept her eyes on the mop. "Yes, ma'am. He slept right through. Peaceful." Vivian's smile held, but her left hand tightened around her coffee cup. Just a fraction. 9 days passed. 9 days of mopping and dusting and pretending. And then the small things started. A black town car began appearing at her bus stop in the morning. Same driver every day. He'd give her a polite nod through the window. Never spoke, never got out. She told herself it was coincidence. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker invited her to tea in the guest house. Not once, 3 times. She asked about Jamal. What did he study? What did he love? What were his dreams? Bernice told her about aerospace engineering, about the Yale program, about the boy who glued his own shoe back together because he didn't want his grandma to worry. Mrs. Whitaker listened, wrote something in a small leather notebook. Didn't explain why, And on the shelf behind her, Bernice noticed something that made her breath catch. A framed photograph, old, black and white. A young man in his 20s holding a small leather card holder. The same silver compass rose on the front. The same one sitting on Bernice's kitchen table at home. She didn't say anything, but her hands went still in her lap. Something else changed, too. The way people talked to her. Mr. Halloran, on his second visit, called her Mrs. Carter. Not Bernice, not ma'am. Mrs. Carter. Like she had a title. The new doctor, Dr. Anwar, who had replaced Dr. Brooks, greeted her at the door one morning and said, "Mrs. Carter, a pleasure. I've heard a great deal about you." Bernice stopped walking. "Heard? From who?" He just smiled and held the door open. She walked through it thinking, something is happening, something bigger than me, and I can't see the shape of it yet. 2 weeks after the storm, Bernice Carter was called into a room she had never been allowed to enter. And the man sitting at the head of the table, she was never supposed to meet him awake. It started with a phone call. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. Bernice was wiping down the kitchen counter when her flip phone buzzed. Halloran. "Mrs. Carter, a car is coming for you and Jamal in 1 hour. Dress comfortably. You are safe. Trust me." "Mr. Halloran, what is this about?" "1 hour, Mrs. Carter." The line went dead. She called Jamal's school, pulled him out of third period. He came home confused, still carrying his backpack. "Grandma, what's going on?" "I don't know, baby, but put on a clean shirt." The black town car pulled up at 11 sharp. Same driver, same polite nod. This time he got out and opened the door for them. Bernice sat in the back seat with her purse on her lap and her hands folded over it. Jamal sat beside her, knee bouncing. They drove up the private road, past the gate, past the servants' entrance. The car didn't stop at the side door. It pulled around the fountain to the front, the marble steps, the main entrance. Bernice had never used the main entrance. In 3 weeks of working here, she'd never even touched the front door handle. A butler opened the door before they reached it. "Welcome, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Ashford is waiting for you." Jamal looked at her. She looked at him. They walked inside. The library was the biggest room Bernice had ever stood in. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Sunlight pouring through tall windows. A stone fireplace at one end. Oil paintings of men in dark suits on every wall. At the far end of the room, in a leather wingback chair, sat a man in a gray cashmere sweater. Thin, pale, a cane leaning against the armrest. But his eyes, sharp and blue, were wide open. Harrison Ashford III stood up slowly. It took effort. His legs shook. He gripped the cane with both hands, but he stood. And he looked at Bernice Carter the way you look at someone who pulled you out of a fire. "Mrs. Carter," he said. His voice was quiet, rough, like a man who hadn't used it in a long time. "I owe you everything. But before I say that, I owe you the truth." He told her to sit down. She sat. Jamal sat beside her. Halloran stood by the window. Harrison spoke slowly. "I was never in a coma." Bernice's hands went tight on the armrest. "After the car accident, which was not an accident, I woke up in the hospital. Alert, aware. But I'd been given a sedative. Heavy. I could hear everything. I couldn't move." He paused, took a breath. "The first voice I heard was my wife's. She was standing over my bed talking to Dr. Brooks. She said, and I will remember these words until I die, 'Keep the coma story going until the trust activates. 3 weeks, maybe 4. The room was silent. I understood then. If I woke up, she'd find another way. So I stayed under. I pretended. I waited. He looked at Bernice. Every person in that house was hired by Vivian. Every single one. The nurses, the staff, the doctor. All of them reported to her. He leaned forward. Except you. Bernice's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. "Mrs. Whitaker, my mother, she brought you in through an old family connection. Vivian didn't choose you, and that meant you were the only person in that house I could trust." He reached under the table, pulled out a small wooden box, set it in front of her. "But that's not the truth I need to tell you, Mrs. Carter. This is. He opened the box. Inside was a photograph, yellowed, curled at the edges. Two men standing side by side. One was black, wearing a factory uniform, smiling wide. The other was white, young, maybe 20 years old, covered in soot. "The young man is my father," Harrison said. "Harrison Ashford II. This photograph was taken in 1974, outside a textile factory in Bridgeport." He slid the photo toward her. "The man standing next to him, the man who pulled my father out of a burning delivery truck that day, is Reverend Eli Carter." Bernice's hand went to her mouth. "Your father-in-law." The room tilted. Reverend Eli Carter, Darnell's daddy. A quiet man who drove a bus and preached on Sundays and never talked about himself. Bernice had never known who he saved that day. Darnell used to say his father was a quiet hero. She'd smile and nod and think it was just a son loving his daddy. "Reverend Carter refused any reward," Harrison continued. "He told my father one thing, one sentence. My father repeated it every year on his birthday until he died." Harrison's voice cracked. He said, "Young man, just remember, kindness travels. You'll know when it circles back." Harrison looked at her with wet eyes. "My father told me, when a Carter comes back into our lives, you treat them like blood." He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Mrs. Carter, I didn't know who you were when my mother hired you, but when Halloran ran your name, when I saw Carter, I knew God sent you, the same way he sent your father-in-law 50 years ago." Bernice was crying. She couldn't stop. She kept pressing her hand to her mouth, but the tears just came. Jamal beside her was perfectly still. Then he spoke, quiet, steady. "Grandma, you always said Grandpa Eli was watching over us." Bernice reached for his hand, held it so tight her knuckles went pale. Harrison Ashford looked at the two of them, the grandson and the grandmother, sitting in his library in their clean shirts with their clean hearts, and he said, almost to himself, "Kindness circled back. Twice." He didn't offer her money. He offered her something she didn't know she was allowed to want. Harrison sat back in his chair, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, took a breath. Then he looked at Jamal. "Young man." Jamal straightened up. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Whitaker tells me you want to study aerospace engineering." "Yes, sir, more than anything." Harrison nodded slowly, like he was remembering something from a long time ago. "My father wanted to be an engineer too. Did you know that? He grew up in a mill town, couldn't afford college, built his company with his hands instead." He leaned forward. "He always said if someone had given him the chance, he would have built rockets instead of trucks." Harrison opened a folder on the table. "I am personally establishing the Eli Carter Scholarship Fund, named after your great-grandfather. Full tuition, housing, books, transportation, at any accredited university you earn admission to." Jamal's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "And every summer, a paid internship at our aerospace cargo division. You'll work with engineers who design the planes that move half the freight on the East Coast." Harrison looked at the boy. "But it's not just for you, Jamal. 6 students a year, in perpetuity, from families in Ridgefield and Bridgeport who give more than they receive. Kids who glue their shoes together because they don't want their grandmothers to worry." Jamal's face crumpled. He turned away and pressed his fist against his mouth. His shoulders shook. Bernice put her arm around him, pulled him close. She was crying too, but she was also smiling. The kind of smile that hurts because it comes from a place that's been locked for so long. Harrison turned to her. "Mrs. Carter." "Sir, I know you refused $50,000, and I know why. I respect it more than you'll ever understand." He folded his hands. "So I won't insult you by offering money." He slid a second folder across the table. "Instead, I want to offer you a position on the board of the Ashford Family Foundation." Bernice blinked. The foundation funds community programs across New England, housing, healthcare, education. But it's been run by people who read reports, people who study poverty from a distance. He looked at her. "I don't want someone who studies it. I want someone who's lived it. Someone who sees what the system misses. Someone who knows what it feels like to choose between an electric bill and an inhaler. Bernice was shaking her head, not in refusal, in disbelief. Your job would be to identify families in crisis and decide how to help them. Real help, not paperwork, not committees, direct support. He paused. The salary is $180,000 a year, full benefits, full autonomy. Bernice's hand went flat on the table, like she needed to hold on to something solid. Sir, I only got a high school diploma. Harrison smiled, gentle, tired, true. Mrs. Carter, my Harvard-educated wife tried to kill me in my sleep. You, with your high school diploma and a flip phone, saved my life with 4 photographs and a crushed mint. He let that sit. I think I know which credential I trust. Then he reached beneath the table one more time, pulled out a manila envelope, set it in front of her. One more thing. Bernice looked at the envelope, didn't touch it. Open it, Halloran said from the window. His voice was soft. She opened it. Inside was a single document. Legal paper, heavy stock, a property deed, her address, 14 Sycamore Lane, Ridgefield, Connecticut, in her name. We purchased the duplex from your landlord yesterday, Harrison said. Quietly. The deed is yours. Free and clear. No mortgage. No rent. No strings. Bernice read the paper 3 times. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. It's your home, Mrs. Carter. It always should have been. She broke. Not the quiet crying from before. This was the deep kind. The kind that sounds like laughing and hurting at the same time. She kept whispering the same words over and over. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Harrison got up from his chair, slowly, leaning hard on the cane. He walked around the table, and he knelt beside her. It took him a long time to get down. His legs were still weak. Halloran stepped forward to help. Harrison waved him off. He knelt on the library floor beside a woman in a clean cotton blouse and took her hand. Mrs. Carter, you don't thank me. This is a debt my family has owed for 50 years. You've just let us finally pay the interest. The room was quiet for a long time, just breathing and crying and the sound of old grief turning into new hope. Then Halloran cleared his throat. Mrs. Carter, there's one more matter. She wiped her eyes, looked up. Vivian Ashford Holloway was arrested this morning at 7:15, along with Dr. Elaine Brooks. Charges include attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. He paused. The photographs you took on your phone, the pill case, the yellow pill, the crooked label, are the foundation of the prosecution's case. Your testimony, if you're willing to give it, will be critical. Bernice sat up straight, wiped her face one last time with the back of her hand. Mr. Halloran, I'll tell the truth. That's all I ever do. The story leaked. It wasn't supposed to, but maybe, looking back, it was always supposed to. 6 months after that morning in the library, a reporter from the Hartford Courant got a tip. Nobody knows who made the call. Some people think it was Detective Donnelly. Some think it was a nurse at the clinic. Doesn't matter. The headline ran on a Tuesday. Ridgefield housekeeper exposes billionaire murder plot, refuses $50,000 reward. By Wednesday, it was everywhere. CNN picked it up, then NBC, then the story crossed the ocean. BBC ran a 3-minute segment. A French newspaper put Bernice's name on the front page. She couldn't even read it. Then 60 Minutes called. They titled the segment, The Woman Who Said No. Bernice was terrible on television. She sat in her kitchen in her Sunday dress with her hands folded and answered every question the same way. Ma'am, you saved a billionaire's life. I just didn't give him the pill. You turned down $50,000. It wasn't mine to take. Aren't you angry about what almost happened? I don't have time to be angry, baby. I got work to do. America fell in love with her. Not because she was perfect, because she was real. 1 year later, the Ashford Family Foundation published its first annual report under Bernice Carter's direction. The numbers were staggering, not because they were big, because they were specific. 62 students had received Eli Carter scholarships, full tuition, full housing, books and transportation included. 12 of them were the first in their families to attend college. 3 were former foster kids. One was a 17-year-old girl from Bridgeport who wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. She wrote Bernice a letter that said, "Nobody ever told me I was allowed to want this." Bernice framed that letter, put it on the wall next to Darnell's photo. The foundation also opened a community health clinic in Bernice's old neighborhood. Free asthma care for uninsured children. 2 full-time doctors. A pharmacy that filled prescriptions at no cost. On opening day, a little boy walked in wheezing. His grandmother was holding his hand. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Bernice met them at the door herself. "Come in, sweetheart, we got you." 311 families across 4 Connecticut counties received rental assistance through the foundation's housing program. Widows, single mothers, elderly couples on fixed income. People the system couldn't see. And then there was the program Bernice invented herself. She called it the Quiet Kindness Grant. Every month, the foundation gave an anonymous gift to someone nominated by their neighbors. No application, no interview, no cameras. Just a knock on the door and an envelope. "If you make people perform their suffering to earn help," Bernice told the board, "you ain't helping, you're auditioning." The board voted unanimously to fund it for 10 years. Jamal started at MIT that fall. Eli Carter Scholar. Class of 2030. Aerospace Engineering. He called Bernice every Sunday at 6 p.m. She never missed it, not once. "Grandma, I'm learning how jet engines work." "Baby, I don't know what that means, but I'm proud of you." "Grandma." Thank you for not giving him the pill." She laughed. "The good kind. The kind that fills a kitchen." Harrison rewrote his will and his trust. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker moved back into the main house. She took her old bedroom on the 2nd floor and filled it with photographs of Eli Carter and Harrison Ashford II standing side by side. Vivian Ashford Holloway stood trial in March. The prosecution's case was built on 4 photographs taken on a gas station flip phone by a woman who made $12 an hour. She was convicted on all counts, 22 years. Dr. Elaine Brooks pleaded guilty to conspiracy, 8 years. Harrison established a household staff council at the estate. Every full-time employee received profit sharing and health care. Within a year, 3 other Fortune 500 families adopted the same model. A reporter asked Harrison why. He said, "Because the woman who saved my life made $12 an hour and couldn't afford her grandson's inhaler. That's not a staffing policy, that's a moral failure." And on Christmas morning that year, Miss Diane, the neighbor who'd run across the street in a thunderstorm with her son's nebulizer, found an envelope on her kitchen table. Inside was a letter from a law firm she'd never heard of. Her mortgage had been paid in full, every penny. No signature, no name, just a small card, cream-colored, embossed with a silver compass rose. She held it up to the light, turned it over. On the back, in neat handwriting, 2 words: "Kindness Travels." 2 years later, Bernice Carter was back in a bedroom at 2 in the morning. But this time, she was the one choosing who to save. Not with a pill, with a chair, a blanket, and a hymn. It was January, cold enough to crack the sidewalks. The Ridgefield Community Clinic, the one her foundation built, was warm inside. Soft lights in the hallway, a children's mural on the waiting room wall that Jamal had painted the summer before. Room 4. A young woman sat on the edge of a plastic chair, 26, thin jacket, no ring. Her daughter, 8 years old, braids coming loose, was asleep on the exam table. An oxygen mask over her little face. Asthma attack. Severe. No insurance. No family in the state. The mother hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. Bernice walked in carrying a warm blanket and a cup of tea. The woman looked up, startled, scared. "Who are you?" Bernice draped the blanket over the woman's shoulders, set the tea on the side table, pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "I'm somebody who used to be you, baby." The woman's face crumpled. "Go to sleep," Bernice said softly. "We got you, both of you, I promise." Then she started humming. Amazing Grace. The same song, the same melody. 2 a.m., a woman beside a bed. But everything else had changed. On Bernice's wrist, a small silver charm bracelet caught the light. One charm hung from it. A tiny compass rose. Harrison had given it to her on the 1-year anniversary of the storm night. He'd had it made from the same mold as the original card holder, the one his grandfather carried through the war. For the woman who found her way in the dark, he'd said. They saw each other often now. Once a month, Harrison drove out to the clinic, not in a town car, in a beat-up pickup truck he'd bought just to annoy his accountant. They'd sit on the clinic porch in plastic chairs, drink bad coffee from paper cups, talk about nothing. He called her sister. She called him brother. Neither of them ever explained it to anyone. They didn't need to. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker passed away that spring, peacefully, in her own bed, in the room with all the photographs. She was 89. She left Bernice a letter, 1 page, 1 line. My son's father was right. Kindness travels. Keep sending it. Bernice read it once, folded it, put it in the leather card holder with the silver compass, and carried it with her every day after that. On the anniversary of the storm night, every year without fail, Bernice drove to Greenwood Cemetery. 2 headstones, side by side. Darnell Carter, Reverend Eli Carter. She'd set a small stone on each one, the way her mother-in-law had taught her. A stone means, I was here. I remember. She'd stand there for a while, let the wind move through the trees, and she'd whisper, Daddy Eli, it came back. It came all the way back. She'd touch the compass on her wrist. And I sent it out again. Quiet, wind, the sound of a life closing its loop and opening a new one.